skip the music. Let's not worry about it. I'm doing all this on my own today, and I completely spaced it, and I don't even remember the name of the program because on the other computer, the name of the program to run the music is right on the front, and it's not on this one, so I'm not going to sit here and try to go finding it. Welcome to the Dividing Line. I'm running all this solo today. Rich has got stuff to deal with at home. Please pray for his wife. She has broken her shoulder, and that means Rich has got BB Warfield things to do. If you don't know, BB Warfield probably could have written 3 or 4 times the amount of material that he did. But he had a sick wife, and he took care of her. He was committed to her, and that's a good example to have. And so he is not here, and I just totally spaced. What is the name of that program? I'm not even going to worry about right now. I'll have to find it later and stick it in the thing, and we'll go from there. And that means it'll be a quiet ending to the program as well. Not quite professional, but that's the way things go. Anyways, all right. So there was a graphic, and I was going to have it up too. And obviously, I'm just not doing real well today. But here is that. Yeah, I'm not going to even be able to do that. I didn't even try to get that set up. Wouldn't even know how to right now. I posted a graphic on. I reposted a graphic on Twitter. Top issues for young voters. And it divides it up between, this is from the Wall Street Journal, divides it up between men and women. And I suppose I could go over to here so that when I'm looking over there, it's a little bit closer. There we go. Top issues for young voters. Economy for men is the big one. And you know, about half as much for the women. These are young men, young women. Democracy, much more, almost non-existent for women. Not that I think most people today know what democracy is, or the fact that we're not a democracy, not supposed to be a democracy, but immigration, real close to each other on that one. Inflation, actually a little bit less, though still close to each other. Anti-right-wing ideology, you know, if there isn't a question of anti-left-wing ideology, which I don't think the media admits exists, or anything like that. Anti-right-wing ideology, real small for men, and actually about the same as immigration and greater for inflation than women. But here's the big one. Abortion. And for the women, they're more concerned about abortion for women than men are for the economy. And in fact, far beyond any concern, young women have been taught that murdering unborn children is the most important thing they can possibly stand for. And I posted this, and a lot of people commented on it. The fellow who posted this that I bookmarked on Twitter said, for young men, the most important issue is to be able to get a job to support a family. For young women, the most important issue is to be able to kill their baby. And, you know, when the left initially started using language such as reproductive rights, health care, reproductive health care, these phrases that have no meaning. No one is saying a woman has to get pregnant. Because, see, what you can't talk about, and we'll never get anywhere until we can talk about it, and I'll be honest with you, given the state of the culture right now, there would have to be a massive, major change. And I'm talking war, and not just war where we're sitting, we've got guys sitting in darkened rooms in Florida blowing people up across the world. I'm talking about war here in the United States. Bombs being dropped, people dying, starvation, disease, the things that war is all about. Remember that Star Trek episode, the original Star Trek series, where they go to this planet, and these two planets have been in a state of war for like 500 years, but they've just made it so clean. It's all done by computer. And if you're attacked, you just go to the disintegration chamber and say goodbye to your family, and there's no blood, no mess. You walk in and then you're gone. And they've been doing this for 500 years. And of course, Kirk, with his, shall we say, limber, flexible interpretation of the Prime Directive, messes it all up. And eventually stops the war. Actually, he did. So, you got to, that was Kirk. Kirk was just, he was that guy. Anyway, it's sort of like that in the sense that I think most Americans, war is something that happens way out there, and we pay for it by printing more money, which is a form of taxation. If you're not familiar with that, inflation is taxation, because you have to pay more and more in taxes as the cost of everything goes up. And income is not keeping track with that, as you well know, as we all well know, even though the entire Harris-Walz election thing is to go, the people, our supporters, are so stupid that we can literally present the idea that we're going to fix things, even though we're the ones in charge. We're not going to run on our record. We're going to run away from our record. And since the media are our sycophants, we pay them, they work for us, they won't ask us any of these questions. They won't force us to deal with any of these things at all. So we'll be good. And it's working. It's and I've talked to some Christians who are going to be voting for Harris, and it's frightening. It really, really, really is. But anyway, what does it take? This is what we can't talk about. Sorry, I'll get back to my point here. What is it we can't talk about, and we will never talk about until some major thing happens that fundamentally changes the structure of the nation, that brings destruction to infrastructure, which we haven't had since, well, we're not going to count the Japanese sub that surfaced off the coast of California and lobbed a few shells inland. Let's not count that. Spanish-American War, Civil War. There just hasn't been anything in anyone's memory, certainly, where you had literal battles taking place in the United States itself. And that changes how you view the world. It changes how everything works. I don't think we're going to ever have a serious conversation about abortion until there's a fundamental change in our society that is brought about by some massive war, nuclear war, something along those lines. And what am I talking about? You can't talk about abortion if you don't talk about fornication. And we don't have a category in Western society for adultery, fornication. Oh, sure, two people get married, a male and a female get married. Well, the funny thing is, even the fake marriages, you'll see the tremendous anger of one person cheating against another. Cheating? What does that refer to? How can you even have a basis for talking about cheating? And so we can't, there's no unfettered sexual relations with anybody you want to have them with is now the highest moral good in our society. And so if something results from that, like, a life, despite all of the mechanisms that we have designed to stop that from happening, which is why the Japanese are going to disappear in a literally number of decades. There aren't going to be any Japanese left. You realize that? See, most people don't even think about that. They don't recognize what's coming. They don't recognize that once you get below replacement level, once you drop below 1.5, for each woman, if they only have 1.5 children, that society is doomed. It will pass away. It'll be replaced by somebody else. Everything they've built, all their cultural heritage, everything goes to somebody else. We're barely above that in the United States, mainly because of the influx of, we're being invaded from the third world. So I'm not sure that really counts. But Japan's not being invaded by the third world. And I think they are at 1.1. It may even be 0.9. So far below replacement that there's no recovering from it. And so that little aspect of cultural continuation, of your nation continuing, it's passed out of the thought life of most Westerners. So Americans, Australians, Brits, Scots, Germans, French, if we can throw them in there if they don't fight with each other. We don't even think about that kind of stuff anymore. It's all about us. It's not about our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, our nation. It's just all about us. Me, fulfill me, my desires, and my sexual desires. And so I get to do whatever I want with whoever I want, as often as I want. And if there's unwanted consequences, then I expect to have the absolute freedom to deal with those things as I see fit. That's what abortion is. Almost all the studies, even by the people on the other side, have demonstrated that minimally 90% of all abortions are just convenience things. There's nothing wrong with the woman. She's perfectly healthy. The child's perfectly healthy. It's just, I don't want to have a baby. And I just didn't do the things that I need to do to keep from having a baby. And so I'm going to murder it. And so when you look at the top issue for young voters for women, and abortion just outstrips everything else, what does that tell you about what women have been taught about themselves? The very capacity that they have to give life, to nurture life. They don't care about it anymore. What does it matter? I mean, feminism is such a poison, and it has had such a massively negative impact upon women that literally they can look at the greatest gift they've been given, their ability to give life and to nurture and to do the things that only mothers can do. And they consider that a liability, something that's negative. In fact, I was thinking about, I've mentioned this before, and I can't prove it beyond all shadow of a doubt and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But in Romans 1:26, now, Romans 1:26, 1:27, key texts on homosexuality, and you can now publish entire books allegedly on the subject of human sexuality and not even bother to deal with the normative teaching that's found in the pages of Scripture. But the text. For this reason, God gave them over to dishonorable passions. For their females exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And the same way also the males abandoned the natural function of the female and burned their desire toward one another, males with males committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. So everybody can see verse 27, male homosexuality, the whole 9 yards. It's mutual. This isn't older men, younger men, all the rest of that stuff. It's toward one another. Males with males, not older males with younger males. Indecent acts. Remember when Barry Lynn couldn't tell you what an indecent act was? Some of you, if you haven't seen it, in 2001, I believe it was, I debated Barry Lynn on this subject, and he obviously had, by that point, was already very, very comfortable doing media appearances, which means he was never asked hard questions. And so, and he didn't think that, a fundamentalist, a Baptist, would be able to ask him hard questions. Well, he also sued us to try to suppress the recording of the debate, but was unsuccessful in that because we countersued, and so the debate's out there. Anyways, you'll if you've never watched the cross-examination of Barry Lynn on the subject of homosexuality, I would look it up and follow along in your Bible or your Greek New Testament and watch as a man who, during the course of that debate, by the way, claimed to receive revelation on the same level as the Apostle Paul. Watch during the cross-examination as that revelation ability collapsed all around it. It's just pretty amazing. Anyway, we get the male homosexuality part in verse 27. But verse 26, for their women, thelai, it's a technical term. It means females over against males. The Greeks knew what the difference was, even if we've lost that ability in our insanity. And I can't, it says, hi Tegar. I can't prove that the best way to translate that is for even their women, even their females. But I think that's what Paul's saying, because most people believe this is the only reference to lesbianism in the New Testament, in the Bible. And right after talking about pathe atamias, dishonorable passions, for even their women, their females, exchanged. This term had been introduced previously in Romans 1, the great exchange, exchanging the truth of God for the lie. And so this is an illustration of what that looks like. And they exchange the natural function for that which is unnatural. And when you think about the number of examples we have down through history of mothers who gave their lives for their children, the beautiful stories of women who put off cancer treatment so as to give life to their child and then passed away as a result. Women who, cover their children with their bodies and they are killed, but the child survives. And you see it in the animal kingdom. Females will sacrifice themselves for their offspring. There is this strong drive. And so it seems to me that what Paul's saying, for even their women, because the female drive is, we used to talk about the biological clock. It's to have babies. It's natural, it's good, it's appropriate. And in fact, in the Bible, the great heartbreak is when women don't have babies, when they can't have children. You see all these women who are praying to God for the ability to have a child. And so it's natural, it's right, it's proper. And so what Paul is saying is even their women who have that strong maternal sense given to them by God, it's good, it's right, it's honorable, it's just, it's proper. Even they can become so twisted in the creator-creation relationship, in that exchange where you exchange the truth of God for the lie. Even their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And that's what young women today, and I think this needs to be a regular element, yes, in the preaching of the local church, but especially in Bible studies, in the more personal situation where the older women can be instructing the younger women. It needs to be recognized, the goodness of God's gift, the fulfillment that can be yours. There's that, some people have said it's a parody account. I don't know. But there's this, 42-year-old woman or something like that, and she's always posting stuff about, I don't have any kids, and so this is what I'm doing this weekend, and I'm so happy. And I saw someone say it's a parody account. I hope not. Would be pretty disgusting if it was. But you look at it and you're left going, there's no true happiness there. This person isn't fulfilled. What's she going to do when she's 83 years old and is afraid of falling, which is what takes a lot of older people out? You fall, you break a hip, and then it's the surgery, and the surgery takes you out or whatever. But you're alone. And you have no one to call. You have no family. You have no children, no grandchildren, nothing. And you're gonna say, "Oh, but man, I'll tell you, I sure lived it up for a while." You and I both know the desperate unhappiness that comes with that kind of a short-sighted, not looking to the future. And for Christians especially, we shouldn't be the short-sighted people. We should be the ones looking long-term, because we know what God's purposes are, and the how to glorify Christ in our obedience to him. And so when you think about what this graph represents, it represents the fact that feminism and Western culture today has taught young women that they're nothing but a sex toy. There's no, that they should be willing to engage in sex with anybody who wants to have sex with them. And this idea of waiting until marriage, commitment, covenant, children, family, oh, please, that was 1950s. We're closer to 2050 than we are to 1950. It's just, think about that one a second. In fact, my wife and I were talking. We were driving home Sunday night after a long service at Apologia. I did the week before, I did the biblical foundation for presuppositional apologetics. I did that in 57 minutes. And then Jeff preached on the practical application, which you would think might be a little bit shorter, but it was almost an hour and 25 minutes. But anyways, we were on our way home after going to my daughter's house and spending time with our grandkids and stuff like that. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to continue doing that in the future for other reasons, just travel reasons, but really enjoy it and get to spend that amount of time. And we're on the way home, and we're both a little tired, and so I'm looking at the music, and I choose the big band playlist. I have a big band, and I know some of you go, the what? But I grew up playing big band music on a radio station in Sun City, Arizona. So I still love Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Artie Shaw, Woody Herman, Yeah, there's even some Guy Lombardo medleys that are really cool too. And greatest big band ever, Glenn Miller and the Army Air Force Band. Man, I'll tell you, he had the pick of whoever he wanted during the war. But anyway, something up tempo, and I mentioned to her, and she thought about it too. Um, we're getting to the point where some of that music was recorded as, as early as 28, 29, 1928, 1929. A lot of it was early 1930s. But we're getting real close to where these songs will have been recorded a century ago. And all these people all the musicians, you're listening to dead people. And we're the first generation that has ever experienced that. Think about that. How could anybody have listened to someone sing who's been dead for 50 years? Nat King Cole, greatest voice ever. Greatest voice ever. I'd still love to listen to Nat King Cole, but we're the first human beings in the history of the world that have gotten to listen to someone singing who's been dead for half a century. And pretty soon, full century. At least as far as when the stuff was recorded. If they were adults, they've been gone longer than that. So anyway, just something to think about in regards to just how time passes, and yet the unusual things about our generation. And I don't mean all the boomer stuff and all the rest of that stuff, just the people that are alive today. We don't realize just how different our experience is daily in comparison to how people lived before us. But young women have been robbed. They haven't been turning young women into men is not enriching for them. That's not how God created them. That's not even from a Darwinian perspective of what wise thing to do. I mean, there's not a whole lot of morals and ethics you can necessarily pull out of Darwinianism, but that would be one. It's just wrong, whatever direction you're going from. And so the idea of being a mother, a wife, covenanted commitments for life, it's just not a part of our culture anymore. And that's why that culture, sometimes we don't ask the question, why should a culture even think that God should continue it? In light of our evident sins, what is it about culture that would make us go, please have mercy on us and continue this culture? And I would say, this culture doing what it's doing, especially as represented by Kamala Harris, the LGBTQIA+++++, and P. Diddy and Epstein, and everything else, just every possible way to mutilate the body, kill the baby, whatever, mutilate marriage, mutilate the family. Why should a culture that celebrates that think that it should continue? It won't. It won't. Nor should it. So what do? We need to faithfully speak to, especially for the young women. I am very thankful that my granddaughters are being raised in a godly home, under the sound of the gospel. I've baptized all three of them, and we have had the conversations with them about the beauty of womanhood. It's so beautiful to see them helping in raising Ransom, our little grandson, who is, what is he, 7? Is there 7 years between him and the next, and Janie? I think it's around like 6-7 years. It's a long time. And I told him when he was born, you're doomed, son. You have 4 mommies. And he does. And you can tell that they just love taking care of that little boy. And that's because that's how they're made. That's they're getting practice for their own in the future, and it's a good thing and it's a right thing, and it's a beautiful thing. And so I'm very thankful that they are being taught that and that they have that foundation. But man, my heart breaks for the vast majority of the young ladies in this nation and in Western culture as a whole that are walking into government indoctrination centers Monday through Friday and being told the way God made them is not how they should live. It's you want misogyny? You want misogyny? Progressivism is misogyny in its fullest form. In its fullest form. It truly is. So anyway, wanted to make mention of that. Next, I had the wonderful opportunity yesterday. So thankful to Christine at Apologia Church. Some folks at Grand Canyon University reached out to them, and then she reached out to me, put them together. I mean, our offices are very close to Grand Canyon University. And of course, I'm a graduate of Grand Canyon College before it became university. And I wouldn't recognize the campus any longer. I can assure you of that. There is, I think, two buildings, I think only two buildings on the campus that were there when I was a student there. Everything else is gone and been replaced with multi-story and everything else. And it's great for Grand Canyon. Hard to go back and go, oh yeah, I remember that. Ethington Theater is the only thing that's still there. Anyway, I got to go, and I thought I was just going to be talking to maybe 10, 15 students. They asked me to address Mormonism, and it's a Christian group on campus. And this lecture room was packed out. In fact, they had to turn kids away. It was filled. I ran out of tracks. I had only brought a certain number with me. I'll know better next time. But it was, there are a couple things that made it really, really enjoyable. First of all, these are just kids. I mean, it's wonderful to see kids, and they've got interest and things like that. And I mean, these folks were tuned in for the whole hour. We went all the way to the cutoff time, and then a bunch of kids stayed afterwards and had me going forever afterwards, which was great. They were interested. It was really exciting to get to see that. It was great for me because it's Mormonism, and my long-term memory is still working quite well. I can still quote Journal of Discourses, volume 16, page 46 off the top of my head, and numerous other LDS scriptures, and it was just like second nature to be talking about it again. And I think it's one of the reasons that the kids enjoyed it is I didn't have a presentation. It was all off the top of my head. Whenever they ask a question, I could give them quotes, stuff like that. So in other words, they know this is someone who knows their stuff, is excited about their stuff, and that excites them too. And it was super, super enjoyable. It really, really was. And I think they're going to have me back. I hope so. There's other things we could talk about, obviously. But that was really neat to see and to be around those young people. It's always very energetic when you're around kids that are, my oldest will be 15. So they'd only be, 5, 6 years older. So right around that same time period, age period. But what's interesting is I was sent a article by Jason Wallace up in Salt Lake City, and we're going to be doing I think for 2025, I'm simply going to go, if God wills, and if God opens the door, sort of like what we were saying all the time in 2020 and 2021, because of government stuff. Depending on what happens, if a miracle takes place in November, And to me, the miracle would be not only that the Marxists lose, but that the non-Marxist survives to January to take office and then continues to survive after that. That would be, I would consider that a miracle. I really would. But if that were to happen, and then I'm going to be all of a sudden planning a lot of stuff. And one of the things we hope to be doing is a conference up in Salt Lake City, August 2nd, I believe is the date. That makes for a really long trip. Colorado, Utah, those areas around there. I mean, really long, as in super duper long, as in a month and a half, probably. Too long. I'm not sure how I'm going to make it work because there's a church that I ran into in Dolores this last trip. I want to do something with them, and I'm not sure how to make it all work. Haven't gotten that far yet, but hopefully we'll be doing those things next year. You know, if not, we'll see. So everything for 2025 is we want to try to do this, but we recognize that the nation may not be in a situation to do that. I mean, literally, the people in charge of this country are trying to drag us into a nuclear war with Russia. So, yeah, you know, the first nuclear bomb goes off pretty much anywhere in the world, and the economic wheels fall off, and everything changes. Everything changes. So, yeah, gotta make plans, but write them in. To use an old person analogy, write them in pencil. Unfortunately, I just realized probably most of the kids I was talking to yesterday wouldn't get that. Write it in pencil? What? You can't write on an iPad with a pencil. Never mind. So all of that to say, I read this article, and it's about the fact that the Salt Lake Temple right now, some of you may not remember. I was going to look up the date and I forgot. But about, what was it, about 6-7 years ago now? There was a major earthquake in Salt Lake City. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think Jason told me that Magna had like 80 or 120 aftershocks and stuff like that. Some major seismic activity up in Utah. But there was a big earthquake in Salt Lake City. And remember, Moroni fell off the top of the temple. Basically, what we've learned since then is it's amazing that thing didn't fall over. It was so badly damaged. The Salt Lake Temple. That would have been amazing. And so it has been, they have been spending, I don't think anybody will ever know how many billions with a B of the money they have stored away. Mormons store stuff away for a rainy day or an earthquake, I guess. The amount of money they have spent basically rebuilding from without knocking it down, and that's what makes it so expensive. It probably would have been cheaper if it had just fallen over. They reused the granite and rebuilt it from the bottom up. Probably would have been a lot cheaper. But they didn't. And what's fascinating is what they have changed. What they have changed. What do I mean? Well, you're probably not aware of this unless you have studied LDS Church history and things like that. But you have to have connections to get into the Salt Lake LDS Temple. Regular old people go to other temples, but you sort of have to have connections because, you know, that's the granddaddy of them all. It's the original, at least in Utah. And, you know, big people get married in there, stars and stuff like that, but Mormon stars anyways. But one of the things that made it special is the original LDS temples And someday maybe they're talking about an open house in 2026, that it will reopen, and so they will have an open house. And man, I'm gonna tell you, I'm not sure how to get tickets for that. But I'm driving up there for that if I can get there. That's for sure. And if they'll let me through the door, they might not. But I'd love to get to tour the Salt Lake Temple, and they will be letting people in to do that. And then once that's done, they tear up all the carpet, or they'll make us wear booties, one of the two, because you're profaning that which is holy because you're Gentiles. And then they will dedicate it, make it holy, and then only people with temple recommends can get in. But anyway, when the temples first started being built, they were very large structures, and you would go from room to room, and actors would act out various scenes: the terrestrial room, the garden room, the fall of Adam and Eve. You eventually are going toward the celestial room, where you have to go through the veil and you have to give all the signs and handshakes and passwords and stuff like that to get in. Very heavily influenced by the Masonic lodge and stuff like that. But it was, you would move from room to room in your temple garments, and there would be live actors doing these things. Well, over the past number of decades, that has changed to where the only temple left in the world, to my knowledge, that was still using live actors was the Salt Lake Temple. And that's what made it special to get your endowments there, or be sealed there for time and eternity in the eternal marriage ceremony or whatever else, because it was unlike any place else where they had gone to projecting. First, they used projection systems and, a movie, basically a film. And in the old style, all the walls would be painted, for the garden room and stuff like. So it'd be all matching with what would be showing on the film, or what would be acted out initially. Well, much to my surprise, in reading this article, and to the disappointment of a lot of Mormons as well, they're not going to have live actors anymore. They have in the renovation, in the changing of everything, they're changing it back so that it's now like all the other temples, and it will be done via video screen now. And so you don't have to move from one room to another. They can change the scenes on the walls. Okay, it's more efficient, I suppose. The celestial room they've rebuilt, and they've tried to keep that as much as possible, like the original up there. But they're making real changes in the Salt Lake Temple to make it more efficient. And I keep thinking back. It was 1999, and I had, for some reason, gone early over to the food court at Crossroads Plaza, which is likewise gone. And they had the general conference on the video screens in the food court. And Hinckley was speaking. And he was talking about this major push to build more and more temples. More and more, lots and lots of temples. Which means they're not going to be as big. They're not going to be as fancy. And Hinckley was also the one that pushed the "We're Christians" to let's start some of the ecumenical dialogue type stuff. And I think he had a major, major impact in, I think, derailing Mormonism. Because, when Mormonism was standing on its own, when Mormonism was emphasizing the first vision, saying we're the one true church, all the churches are an abomination, their creeds are corrupt. At that time in the 1980s, they were growing. When I first started studying Mormonism, I've shared this this statistic a number of times. There was a year in the 1980s where the average Southern Baptist church had 274 members. And in an average week, 273 Southern Baptists became Mormons. So that's one church per week, 52 churches per year converting to Mormonism. And people actually appreciate a religion that stands for something. I think that's something that, for example, Pope Francis doesn't understand. Liberation theologians do not understand. They don't get it. People want to actually believe something, even if it costs them something. And Mormonism has abandoned that. You talk to Mormons today, and there's always been a very subjective element to Mormonism. You know, the Spirit testified to me, and I prayed, and that was the opening through which has come the poison that can now explain why the majority of the Salt Lake City Council is LGBTQ, why there are LGBTQ organizations on campus at BYU, why Utah is not nearly as reliable a red state as it once was. And it's because of this subjectivism. There's, Mormonism has a gendered God. The God of Mormonism is a physical male who has, through sexual intercourse, begotten billions of spirit babies. I mean, he's a busy guy. So the idea of homosexuality, transgenderism, all the sexual revolution stuff, I would think wouldn't have a ghost of a chance in Mormonism. And yet it's making great headway because the system was never designed to be able to provide the foundation for morals and ethics. Because without one creator God, you don't have a foundation for morals and ethics. An exalted man from another planet is insufficient as the foundation for objective morals and ethics. So, I didn't see that as a younger person because we weren't facing the same things we're facing now. But that, I think, is what has taken place up there. So I really wonder what the impact of this fundamental changing of the temple ceremonies, because I've thought about it. Why do people keep going? Because, back in the olden days, initially what Joseph Smith taught, and if you haven't studied Mormonism, I can understand why this would be a little bit weird. But what Joseph Smith initially taught was that exaltation to godhood was like a train. Back then, a coal-powered train, but steam engine, a train. And so you're not going to be able to be exalted farther than those who are before you on the train, who are your ancestors. And so the idea is to do that genealogical work, to do that studying. That's why, the Mormon Church spent all that tithe money buying everybody else's genealogical library. If you want to get genealogical information today, you got to get it from the Mormons. They own all that, my family, all that stuff. They're all LDS. And they did that with the idea that I can't become exalted unless my ancestors. Well, there's one major problem that the early Mormons really hadn't thought about. And that is, even in their day, how much documentation was there? Not a whole lot.
And once this message goes outside the United States, then it really struggles, because you go to a lot of lands, they have got nothing like that at all. They may have an oral tradition, but they don't have any way of tracing anything back. And by now, I would assume that the vast majority of the doable genealogical work has been done. And the vast majority of the baptisms for known individuals has already been done. So if you do your genealogical work and then turn your names in, the computers could come back and go, well, that person was baptized for this time and in this temple by this person, and they've got all that stuff. That's one of the fascinating things about going through a temple. I've gone through 2 temples, and the modern temples, the baptismal font and the room where you lay the hands on the head to receive the Holy Spirit. You could see when you went through before they were dedicated and opened up, you could see where the desks were going to be, and you could see the network connections. It's all computerized now. Back in the old days, it wasn't. I get it, but they've computerized all that stuff, and I just don't understand how anybody would have. You used to go in and be baptized like 50 times in a session. I don't know how you could come up with 50 people anymore to be baptized for. I don't even see how you could do it without going, well, we're repeating things now. Well, I suppose they might allow that. I don't know. I haven't asked anybody about that. They might be a little bit slow to have a discussion about that. But it just makes me wonder. They're still building a lot of temples. What's the participation rate? What's the percentile of LDS people today who are actively seeking to be involved in doing temple works? I mean, after you receive your own endowments as a male, wonder how long before that'll change, and being sealed for time and eternity. Maybe you could do some of that for some relatives, because it's one thing to be baptized for relatives, it's another thing to go through the whole marriage ceremony and all the rest of that kind of stuff. I just wonder what the attraction is any longer. And the temple here in Mesa, Arizona, much larger than, for example, the little teeny temple that I went through out in. I could have gone through the Mesa temple when they did dedication, but I didn't get a chance to. But the one out north on Happy Valley Road that or is that Pinnacle Peak? Anyway, one of the two. They're little. I mean, that one out there is not much bigger than a stake center. And at least the one in Mesa, in the olden days, that was the only temple in Arizona. And so, like, if you were a Mormon in Mexico and you wanted to be sealed or do baptism of the dead, you traveled from Mexico to Mesa, Arizona to do that kind of stuff. It was a big deal. It took some commitment to do that kind of thing. If you make the temples something that are, there's always going to be one within 20 miles, and they're just not all that special anymore as far as what they look like and things like that, I just wonder how much participation there's going to be. And you combine that with the fact that it's become so subjective, and many of the positive authority claims that were once something that drew people, they're not making them anymore. In fact, they're discouraging their people from making them. So I don't know what the future of Mormonism is going to be. I really, really, really don't know. But the changes in the Salt Lake Temple do make you wonder. Real quickly, as we wrap up here, just within a matter of weeks after the discussion by the Pope talking about you know, all these different ways to God, he has made further comments that demonstrate really beyond all doubt that he is a staunch inclusivist, minimally. And again, probably here he says it's God's will that there be all these different religions. Now, look, we can talk about the decree of God, but he's using that in not God's, he's not talking about, he doesn't hold to the decretive will and the revealed will, the law, and then what God intends to do in his own creation by his decree. He's literally saying that's how God wanted things to be. And again, anybody who knows Roman Catholicism knows that's not what the church has taught for so long. And you see, you just keep chipping away at that. You know, a little bit here, a little bit there. Doesn't have to be a big thing. You run your Pope splainers out, and they go, well, you know, this guy said this guy said that. You get away with it. But this is all happening at the same time that the Pope has appointed a consultor to the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. The Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith is the Old Inquisition. It's the ultimate doctrinal authority within the Roman Catholic Church. Tucho Fernandez, the wild, crazy man in charge of all of that, again, put there by Francis. But Father Maurizio Chiodi, I like that. Maurizio, come here, Maurizio. Maurizio Chiodi has been appointed, this was September 23rd, yesterday, as a consultor to the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Why is that relevant? Because everybody keeps saying, oh, the Pope hasn't changed any doctrines. The Pope hasn't changed any doctrines. You change doctrine most effectively by changing what is taught regularly in the schools and in the regular functioning of a religious organization. You take over the seminaries, you take over the schools, and that's how you change doctrine. Everything will follow from that. This guy has, now what's interesting, he's made the argument that there might be circumstances in which homosexual relationships could be licit and could be appropriate. Not that all of them are. You see, that's how you do it. Just a little bit here. Okay, that gets established. Then you do a little bit here, and then a little bit here. And 50 years later, you're now over here when you used to be over here. And so when people say over and over again, oh, come on, you're just too hard on Francis. He's not changing anything. If you are assigning these people to these high-level positions of authority, you are changing the teaching of the church. And if you can't see that, it's just because you're dull. That's the only way to put it. I'm sorry. You're just not thinking. And you're not seeing how this has been done in church after church after church after church elsewhere. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. They've learned. You don't just come out and go, hey, I'm going to change everything here. We've always used to believe this. Now we're going to. No, you do that slowly. That's how the Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, they blew it in the 1970s, and they had their, you know, Christ is going to return, and this, you know, and they lost 1 million people. 1 million people. 10 years after that false prophecy, 1 million people were missing. They were gone. Sadly, they all became the religiously abused. They didn't go to any other church. But they learned their lesson. So they're changing, the Jehovah's Witnesses are changing their theology right now. They're getting rid of all the 1914 stuff. It used to be central to their theology. But they didn't come out one day and say, you know what, we blew it. We're gonna change that. No. They're doing it one little step at a time, just by ignoring it. Letting it just pass into the mists of memory. To be forgotten. That's how you do it. And if you want a good example of how effective that is, I'll close with this. You want to know how effective that is? It was only literally a matter of months ago. You know, maybe 30, 36 months ago, that we were sitting around going, never forget what they did to us. Never forget the masks. Never forget the mandates. Never forget. And now the news is filled with studies about aggressive cancers and myocarditis and all this kind of stuff. It's all over the place. Did it even come up in the debate? Is anybody talking about it? I mean, I know why the Republicans aren't, because Trump took credit for Operation Warp Speed and all that kind of stuff. I get it. But for the rest of us, it was the Biden regime that locked us down, that talked about the long winter of death, and forced many people who did not want to get them to be inoculated with poison. Who cares anymore? That's so long ago. That's so 2021. See how that works? So you can put these guys into positions of authority in the Vatican, and you just move a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and 4 years later, you don't remember where you were 4 years ago. There's been a big change, but nobody cares. Nobody even thinks about it anymore. That's how it works. That's how it works. If you don't have an unchanging standard to appeal to, that's what's going to happen to you too. That's what's going to happen to you too. So anyway, I was going to talk a little bit about the Do No Harm Act. Look it up sometime. It'll give you an idea. Maybe we'll talk about it next time, but give you an idea of where Kamala Harris is coming from. She was one of the primary sponsors of that bill in 2019, to give you an idea that religious liberty is nowhere on her radar screen. Well, okay, it is, as something to attack, not something to defend. And every single one of you who call yourselves Christians, they're going to vote for that Marxist mess. I just don't even know what to say. We will have lots to talk about in the gulags when they put you there along with all the rest of us, and you're wondering what in the world happened. Yeah, that's where it'll go. Okay, so as I said at the top of the program, I have no earthly idea. Wait a minute. Hey, I wonder if this... Nope. Just have to look around, I guess. Hey, thanks for watching the program, folks. We'll see you next time. God bless. Oh.